Welcome to Lizcapism. I'm Liz, and today we're diving into the madcap world of medieval pattern draping. This is part of my medieval kirtle project, an adventure in medieval garments, modern research, and sewing shenanigans. My first video in this series is in the card above and linked below. It's about the myth of historical accuracy and how to do research anyways. In this video, I'll put aside academia and official histories. Instead, we'll learn how community resources are the foundation of historical sewing. I will extol the benefits of shared knowledge and experience. In short, I will ask you not to reinvent the wheel. Our costuming compatriots have produced a horde of information for us. Let's learn how to find it and how to use it, instead of striking out alone. After I had sewn my shift and done enough research for me to have a plan, it was time to then draft the pattern. Medieval sewing, as I have said, is pretty new to me. Now, it's all very well to toss how to draft a kirtle into Google, but without community input and feedback, I would not have known how good these results would be. I could waste a lot of time and fabric if the top results were not actually helpful. I immediately turned to my community. There have been several Costubers who have made this style of gown before. How did they do it? V from Snappy Dragon was my first stop. Her kirtle drafting video was a great step because, like me, it was a relatively new era for her. Her main reference was a tutorial on the Cotte Simple website. Nearly every costumer sharing their kirtle making experiences referenced this site. It was evident to me that this was a quality resource. It turns out that Cotte Simple was very helpful, so hooray for sharing resources! Okay, Liz from the future here. I was so fascinated with the ubiquity of this tutorial, which was originally posted 18 years ago, that I reached out to Tasha Kelly, the creator of Cotte Simple, to ask her about her start in costuming and how she came to be the shadow mentor of medieval sewists everywhere. Sections of that interview will be interspersed throughout the video. Enjoy!
So it was so interesting to me that in looking through all of these resources that existed and finding the ones that worked best for most people, almost all of them cite Cotte Simple directly. It seemed uncanny just how much people seem to reference it. And I'm wondering, had you any idea how integral it would become to a community of costumers?
I certainly hoped that that would be the case eventually. When I first started coming up with the idea for the website, it was the early 2000s, and the web was quite different back then. It was still quite the Wild West. And yeah, I came up with this idea that the concept of fitting a complex draped garment did not have to be impossible to learn. Up until that point, there had been a fair bit of mysticism around it. But I thought, here we have this wonderful new resource. The internet is making things accessible to everyone for free. Why don't I create a pictorial step-by-step for this, and then everyone can have it. Anybody who wants it can have it. So I had this vision. Way back then, I thought this could be the thing that everyone references from here on out for this particular time period and location.
And like all good resources, it has its own extensive list of links to even more resources. This network of links, blogs, videos, and tutorials was a lifeline for me. Put simply, the method outlined in Cotte Simple tutorial is pretty straightforward. Drape a section of fabric over your head, then pin and baste until you have the shape and bust support that you need. Because of the need for a tight fit, this is not a draping job that one person can do by themselves. I called my mother for help. She and my aunt, not pictured, came around for an afternoon to help me out. My mother sewed me into a very large section of cotton, while my aunt and I played the 1995 Pride and Prejudice. I stood, more or less like this, for about 6 hours. So while past me wails on her delts and lats, which were very sore the next day, let's get back to the theme of the video. Don't reinvent the wheel. This is an expression I first heard while attending university. I was in training to become a teacher, and from the very first, all of my professors and instructors emphasized this phrase. A lot. A lot. The expression essentially means that doing work others have already done is unnecessary and redundant, especially if using their experience and knowledge will make your life easier. At its core, it's a call for efficiency and simplicity. But I feel like it is also about community and collaboration. It reminds us that life and work are easier when we build on our knowledge collectively and take pride in that mutual help. I feel deeply that it is not possible to do anything truly alone, and the more we try, the less effective that work becomes.
There are not a lot of websites that started in 2003 that are still around. So often when you find websites that have these resources or refer to resources, it sort of becomes this like mythological treasure hunt where you hear tell of this website or this blog entry and you follow link upon link and they're all dead ends because the internet, changes, and totally valid, but it makes it hard, especially if you're new to the community and don't know who to ask. I want to offer a mild congratulations for having maintained the website.
Well, and thank you for telling me that it matters, because I do. I renew, my domain every year. I log in every so often and make sure I'm up to date. Unfortunately, I know that my website is now looking very 2010s. But yeah, it was important to me to keep it available, even though web by itself is becoming a little passé in the sense that, like you, lots of folks are doing video tutorials now. They're on TikTok. All that's wonderful. But I wanted to keep that web presence around for just the easy access. Anybody can. They've got their internet access. They can get in there. They can learn a thing or two, look at some interesting pictures, maybe go buy a book or two. Just like me, when I was starting out, I would have loved to have had a site like this. And they say, write the thing you want, right? So that's what I did. I wrote the thing that I wish had been there for me when I was starting out.
Carl Sagan, an astrophysicist and science communicator, once said, "If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe." To be responsible for the entire gown, would I first have to produce the sunlight that grew the grass? That grass which would feed the lamb, who would grow its keratin-based woolly hair, the woolly hair that I would then have to shear, clean, card, and spin and weave into wool fabric that I could then use to make the kirtle? Of course not. Carl Sagan was not trying to be obtuse, and no more am I promise. The point is that what constitutes doing something for yourself, or making something from scratch, is pretty arbitrary. More to the point, there is no inherent value to it. It is not cheating to use lessons that others have already learned and shared. It is not noble to make more work for yourself. It is not a weakness to ask for help. It is not better to have done a thing alone. So now that my mother has me good and trussed up, we'll cut me out of this cotton and try to get a final pattern out of this nonsense. While I do that, let's talk about the existing resources, lessons, and patterns that I used to get the final pattern pieces. First and foremost, I must not neglect my mother's help. This whole project would have been moot if I had not had a capable partner, someone who understood the tutorial and tolerated my endless nitpicking and backseat sewing. So, thanks, Mom. I have already mentioned Snappy Dragon's kirtle video, and I'll now add several more video creators that I referenced, both for their own experiences and to crib from their resources. Rather than name them all, I'll simply direct you to the video hosted by Courtney from Opus Eleni. This live video from the Costume Symposium contains every single other costuber I referenced. Links to all of them below. And finally, we'll talk about websites and blogs. La Cotte Simple was, as I've already said, the #1 referenced source by far. And if you spend a little time on the website, you'll definitely see why. Not only are there in-depth tutorials, but there is a trove of links, book recommendations, and more. Of special note are 3 websites that I found via these links. Rosalie's Medieval Woman, Festive Attire, specifically the post entitled Zen and the Art of Spiral Lacing, and the Turnip of Terror website, which is a resource repository in and of itself.
What was your entry point into historical costuming?
In the late 90s, I had a good friend who was in the SCA. She tried to convince me for years to attend an event. I finally gave in and went to an event. There were people dancing, people playing music. They had all these interesting costumes on, and I was instantly hooked.
You talked about going into a more serious academic approach. Do you have any kind of academic background? I saw that you had gone to a museum for the Charles Dubois Pure Point.
I have a bachelor's of arts in English literature with a minor in, so I knew enough how to write a paper. I knew how to do basic research. I knew, the basics.
Through the tutorial on La Cotte Simple, you end up with 4 pieces, 2 front and 2 back. I averaged the edges of each pattern and then traced them. I then took the 2 back pieces, averaged them, and came up with a single back piece. I did the same for the front pieces. These 2 pieces were now what I used to cut out my first mock-up. I used these wool upholstery swatches for my first mock-ups. Because the fit is tight, and I had this wild idea to make the mock-ups into wearable vests, I set grommets into them. Was this time-consuming? Yes. Did it result in a better fitting mock-up? Also yes. And it was an opportunity for me to brush up on grommet setting with an online tutorial. Now came the laborious task of determining what changes to make after this first mock-up. Because I was worrying about cutting the arm's eyes too large, I rather overcorrected and made them way too small. I have a bad habit of doing too much in a single step, so wary of overcorrecting in the other direction, I decided to reference patterns that I already had. I compared their arm size, mindful of differences that might exist in shoulder seam placement, and made adjustments accordingly. Mock-up number 1 was only for a body fit, so the neckline was high and it was sleeveless. Once I was confident with that fit, I made alterations to the pattern for the neckline and drafted the sleeve. The second mock-up had a lower, wider neckline and set-in sleeves. However, after that, it still needed adjustments, including taking more from the arm's eye. I don't know what about the project has inspired this exactitude and care in my alterations, but frankly, I don't hate it.
We touched on the pourpoint, so why don't we talk about that a little bit? Both your experience researching as well as then producing all of that magnificent resource for everybody else. So why don't you tell me a little bit about it?
Sure. Well, like I said, there were the two Charlies, and I started off super interested in Gold Charlie, Charles de Bois, which is the really form-fitting, sleek one that is in Lyon in France. And that one I only finally got to see in person in 2016, but it was at a museum behind glass with, docents carefully watching, so I couldn't take really any good photographs. And super exciting, but not quite the level of access I would have liked. That one was always capturing my imagination because it had so many pieces and it had such strange and interesting tailoring. So long before I had a chance to see it in person, I was trying to collect resources on it, both photos and written scholarly interpretations, patterns, what have you. And I decided to explicate that for the public, just take all those, synthesize them, make them more accessible for folks who wanted to recreate this really complex garment. So that was my first love. I did that I think that was one of the first articles I put on my website beside the fitting tutorial for women's close-fitting gowns or dresses. And in doing that, I sort of created this strange branch where I became both a men's clothing expert and a women's clothing expert for the time, since clothing was so gendered in that time. But it was very gratifying to have really the whole costuming world, folks who were doing sort of martial stuff, folks that were doing, beautiful dresses for showing up to look great at events and hang out with other people who liked a costume. So it was the best of both worlds, studying both of those, tracks, we'll say. And then eventually I realized I could not understand how the red Charlie was made. A friend had commissioned me to make a reproduction of that garment, and I missed the mark so completely. He loved it, but I missed the mark. I knew this wasn't the way it was really made. I thought there's just something going on here in the tailoring that is complex and not obvious to the eye. And the French article that I had on the topic from the museum that held it really was complex. Like there were just tons of layers and it just seemed hard to understand how it was all coming together. So that's what inspired me to apply for the Janet Arnold grant and to go to France and take it off the mannequin, really study it. I mean, I brought calipers with me. I really studied it, measured everything to within an inch of its life, and then come home and recreate it. And that was an amazing process. That was just a huge highlight in my life that I was able to do that and recreate it. And it looked correct this time because I figured out the secret.
That must have been fantastic.
It was.
Do you speak French? Was it a challenge to have to transition into an academic context where not only is it academic, but also it's in a different language?
I don't speak French. I kind of read it. So I know just enough to be dangerous, but I'm comfortable with the language in the sense that I'm not afraid to just sit there and look things up or do a translation in OCR if need be, that sort of thing. So yeah, I do a lot of laborious self-translation. Yeah.
I tell you what, I speak French. I've spoken French my entire life. Does not make it easier to read academic papers about tailoring, because that is a whole language set in and of itself. It's like talking to a regular English speaking person when you're talking about godets and grain lines and cutting on the bias. It's that same kind of thing. The language barrier still exists.
Now for all the marbles. Mock-up number 3. Full length this time, and lined. Perversely, I didn't set grommets in this one. My fanciful self decided that I might hand sew the eyelets at a later date. Probably not. I measured from the end of the mock-up to the desired skirt length. Because the wool that I'm using for the final gown is 60 inches wide, I won't be putting in godets to widen the skirts, which is how medieval sewists would have managed wide skirts when the standard cloth width was pretty narrow. Rather, I will have the skirts flare directly from the base of the bodice. The consequence of this is that every single skirt seam will be on the bias, so I'll need to hang it so it can stretch out before I can hem it. But if I can get away from the hellscape that is sewing godets, I'm happy to wait for that. In this video, I'm pointing out the techniques I learned and the resources I used for this project specifically. But it's important for me to tell you that the continual referencing and learning is what I do with all of my projects, no matter how small. Whether it's calling my mom, texting a friend, or Googling a tutorial, I have never done anything entirely alone. For this reason, despite my limited formal sewing education, I hesitate to say that I am self-taught. I prefer to think of it as self-directed learning. We're coming full circle on my history with teacher education. Countless teachers have instructed me. YouTube has provided me with endless lectures. The lessons that I have read on blogs are legion. I have made nothing that is not built on the work of others.
Despite the fact that we have all this beautiful, fantastic information on the web, are there still major limitations for people? And if so, what are they?
Yes, absolutely. I'll say the obvious one: money. Money is still always a challenge for some folks, and I understand why. I mean, fabric costs have gone through the roof. Access to fabric has changed. It used to be that if you lived anywhere near a reasonably large metropolis, there'd be like a remnant type store, some place you could go to get interesting silks and wools, 100%. These things are disappearing. Most of these places are going online. So you have to have your internet access if you want to buy a lot of this stuff. You have to have the disposable income to buy it. I would say obviously internet access if you don't have access to, I mean, these books aren't sitting at the same library. This is the kind of thing you'd need to ILL multiple books if you wanted to go that route. So you'd also need that ability, the knowledge to go into a library that sponsors ILL with academic institutions and will let you pull those books. So that's also a barrier. So it's changed, it's gotten better, but money-wise and access to good materials is still somewhat of a challenge.
Here are the successive pattern pieces and mock-ups that made up this process. Each one builds on the previous. It's an apt metaphor for the knowledge that I have gained from those who have learned before me. We are a community. That does not only mean that we share a common passion or a communal space, it also means that we are subject to one another. We must rely on each other, not only to learn, but to relearn, to question old ideas and see if there are new answers. Dogma does us no good if it keeps us from moving forward.
I put it out there with the understanding that people are going to riff off of this and take it to the next level. People always, there's doing it quote unquote first, and then there's doing it better. I think sometimes people can improve on first efforts. And I kind of expected that would always happen, and it has to some degree in different formats. I always figured more people would come out with more slick versions of what I have been doing. But I'm thrilled that I still hold that position and that it's still relevant. That it's still relevant, really. That's the amazing thing. Even with new research that's come out with, the interesting sort of bra styles from Germany and Austria, specifically Austria, that's a little bit later. I guess it's still relevant.
Really quick, I did want to just thank you for sitting down with me and having this lovely chat, because it was marvelous to get to talk to you and hear all about your origin story.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. It's been an education and a really lovely chat. Thank you so much for sitting down with me.
And thank you, Liz.
At the beginning of this video, I repeated an old saying: don't reinvent the wheel. This is true and wise. I offer you an additional caution. Don't cling tight to the wheel when someone comes along with a cart and offers to carry you a little ways down the road. They have used their wheels to great effect. Get in and take your ease. Ask how they did it and if they can teach you. Oh, this? They might say. You can have it. Attention one and all. Last year, I made a video where I read A Child's Christmas in Wales for you all, and I very much enjoyed it. This year, I'm doing another holiday story time. This time, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Instead of the pomp and circumstance of last year's video where I intercut a bunch of archival footage, I will instead be hosting a live stream. The live stream will include some guest readers, and there will be a charity fundraising component. I'll announce the charity and the guests shortly, and so follow my Instagram for details that will be coming out within the week. If you like this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and to subscribe. Ring the notification bell to never miss a video release. Thanks ever so much for watching. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon.